There are three things that every cybersecurity system needs to have in place. You need to be looking after your people, your process, and your technology in that order all the time. Right, Stephen?
Absolutely, Jason. The good guy's got to be right every single time. The bad guy's only got to be right once.
Okay. So the question then becomes, how can we help our teams be right more often? Well, here's your answer. Join us now for end user cybersecurity training. But let's talk a little bit about who Endsight is first. Endsight does computer system support for organizations in Northern California, Southern California. We also work with law firms in Hawaii. Our purpose is to help others thrive. And the reason this is important to us is we think that cybersecurity is something that folks need to be paying a lot of attention to, particularly in 2026, because the world is changing. Stephen, you've got all kinds of presentations this year in 2026 that you're going to be sharing with people about why it's always been important, but it is becoming even more important with the advent of AI.
Yeah,
And
thanks, AI.
so yeah. And so we believe that this is something that people should be paying attention to. And we are open sourcing as much of this knowledge as we possibly can, because we think a rising tide lifts all boats. We think we're pretty well suited to share some of this information because we're an award-winning organization, not just in support, but also in cybersecurity. Stephen, not to toot our horn too much, but tell us a little bit about Right of Boom and Endsight's involvement there.
Yeah, so everybody, Right of Boom is the premier cybersecurity conference for managed service providers in the world. Our organizations. We are both on the council for dictating the content, as well as a significant participant in the conference. Last year in 2025, there was a contest. The contest is effectively a capture the flag. A capture the flag in my world is effectively, hey, we're hiding little strings of text or characters in various places around various computer systems, places hackers might consider using to actually get into systems, right? So you have to flex your knowledge of how hackers work. You get your team, they give you a list of questions or a list of scenarios. You find the flag or the code, you put that into the website, you get a yes or a no. We had this competition last year. There were 86 MSPs that participated in this premier conference in the world, and we took second. And we're pretty proud of that. It's a pretty good thing. This is not a loss to us. This is a very significant victory. So we're really proud of our team. We really can think like the hackers do, and we really like growing and using modern technology. So this is a cool thing for us.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. We're not trying to toot our own horn here. We just want you to understand that Stephen and his team are highly qualified to be sharing quality information with you about being a good cyber citizen. I'm here to help, but Stephen's going to be carrying the bulk of this. Our agenda for today is fairly straightforward. We're going to do a fundamentals overview. We're going to talk about cybersecurity hygiene. This should hopefully feel to folks like Kellogg's Corn Flakes tasted again for the very first time. But if it doesn't, that's okay, because repetition is part of a good cybersecurity end user training approach. We're going to stop midway for Q&A. We've got a handful of questions that we've heard consistently that we'll probably share. We've got some specific attack examples that we'll share with you. We've got some legal rules and ethics that we will go through specifically for our law firm clients. Anybody that's watching this in a law firm, there's some specificity here that the California Bar Association asked us to include, and so we've included that for you. And then we'll leave you with a recap and some resources for you. Okay, so the gist of this here is that we believe that anybody, particularly really smart people like Stephen, can be the victim of a cybercrime. And the data really supports that. That's why we're taking to the internet to try to share this information with people. And you can see this is not the newest of graphs in the world, but the trajectory of attacks has pretty much conformed to what you're seeing there. And so we think this is really, really important to be paying attention to. Ultimately, what tends to happen, because people tend to be the weakest link in the cybersecurity threat landscape, right, Stephen?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So when someone is coerced into clicking on something they shouldn't, which is the typical way that this happens, this is what can occur, right? So this is the anatomy of a phishing attack and how it resulted in this case study in a $2.5 million ransomware attack. So The way that it started out is the way that you would expect these things to start out.
Most of them for sure.
Someone got tricked into clicking on something that they shouldn't. But unlike how it works in the movies, their screen didn't go black and have a skull and crossbones pop up and say, you have been hacked, you are ransomed. That's not what happened. What happened instead was a human being now had access to the corporate computing environment. And for 8 weeks, the logs demonstrate that malicious actor just kind of poked around in the environment trying to figure out what was the quality of the access that he had just gotten into. At the 9 to 10 week mark, the logs go cold. There's not a lot of activity. And there's a reason for this. Stephen, you want to jump in here and kind of enlighten us as to what happened or what we suspect happened?
Sure. So the threat actor industry, and that's the official fancy term for it, is very large nowadays. Thank you to Bitcoin that allows us to pay ransom demands in untraceable, decentralized, non-regulated currency, which is so wonderful. But that's one of the reasons we play catch up so much, is just so you know, the reason that everything's new all the time is because the bad guys have a lot of money. In this case, the lot of money allows the industry to specialize in effect running a legitimate business, right? So there are kind of two different types of entities in this particular scenario. You have either your very charismatic person or your very talented hacker, someone who can get you in by either tricking a human or breaking through a system. This is your initial entry vector. This is the person that actually does the compromise. They get you in. However, those people are usually interested in making a quick buck. They'll say, hey, I've got access to a law firm in Southern California. They have 50 people. I have access to their cloud and I have access to their internal network. $600. And that's a real number from the dark web, just so you know. This is about how much it costs to buy access to a compromised account. So if you're thinking supply and demand, if the cost's only $600, there must be a decent amount of supply out there. There is. However, those people don't always want to perpetrate the attack and negotiate with your insurance organization or the FBI and have a risk of actually being caught, whatever that case may be. So they auction that access off to the person who's actually going to do the work and perpetrate the actual attack. Typically a larger payload or a larger payday, but also a higher risk, right? So maybe you don't want to be involved in the negotiation, but you're really good at getting in. You pick one of the two sides, right? That's what happened here. Probably during the 9 to 10 week mark, this person was looking for a buyer, and then they found one.
And then he found one. And so at the 11-week mark, the logs begin to show activity again. And the suspicion is that the access had changed hands. So after that, about 3 months after the initial access was achieved, a ransomware attack was launched. It was launched at 4:00 in the morning, and it was for $2.5 million. And so that chain that we're describing here, that's what makes training like this so very important, because cybersecurity is about people, process, and technology. And Stephen, I know you like to say it's in that order, which is why we place so much effort on trying to do end user training.
I do. It's important to point out technology is required frequently, and we're not saying technology is bad. It is not. And it is something you must have to actually protect yourself, because humans are imperfect and moves too quickly. However, technology is usually the safety net. It's the least impactful portion of this chain. If you get to the point where your technology saved you, 2 layers have failed.
That's right. And so we kind of like to compare this to home security, because all of us kind of get that, right? In the same way that you wouldn't just put up a fence and call it a day, you can't just do what we're doing today, right? It's the most important one, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you need to be doing. And you can take a look at that. This is all a little bit beyond the scope of what we're here to do today, but these are all the different layers that need to be put in place if you are attempting to have a best practice cybersecurity protection scenario in place in your organization. With that, we're going to move into some of the training and a couple of things that we want to bring to your attention that we saw last year. For example, Stephen, want to talk to us about fake CAPTCHAs?
Absolutely. So, for those of you who don't know, and if you were taking our live training, I would actually ask, does anybody know what a CAPTCHA is? A CAPTCHA is the industry's term for the technology to prove you are a human and not a robot. Hopefully, if you're watching this video, you've seen something like the two images on screen. What a CAPTCHA asks you to do is type something into their website or find all the fire trucks or click the I'm not a robot box on their actual website to prove you can do human actions that a robot can't. Interestingly enough, ChatGPT's agent mode was able to break this. So the minute we got decent enough AI, this doesn't seem to be super useful anymore. That being said, the attackers know compelling someone to take an action is a good time to trick them. So they have created fake CAPTCHAs. And that looks like some of the two options we have here. What it is in this case, the difference is these boxes are asking you to do something on your computer, not something on the web page. Click Start, click Run or Windows R, which gives you the same thing. Control V is paste and run. So what they are asking you to do is paste their command into your computer to prove you are a human to the website. That logically doesn't work out from a technological standpoint, but effectively what you're doing here is running the command the bad guys want you to run. This is a really easy way to trick humans. It's something we've seen a giant increase in 2025, right? And it's something that's very important to train on because the simple fact of the matter is, you currently have, and I'm not sure the security community does, a technology that prevents you from typing things into a run box and running it. That's like, I can't do that. So this is
Yeah.
why this training matters.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephen. All right. So I think that's probably a nice segue into our fundamentals overview. So let's talk about some of the fundamentals. Fundamental number one, every time that your fingers touch a keypad or they touch a keyboard, we need to be, as users and as good corporate citizens, cultivating a habit of suspicion. And definition two there is the driver. Cautious distrust. It's really, really important. Second fundamental is that multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, if you haven't heard of this, that's a problem. But if you don't have it fully deployed, that's a problem. So, Stephen, can you help us remedy both of those problems?
I would love to help you remedy the deployment.
How about with some information? How about that?
Sure. Listen, if I could deploy multi-factor for you over a YouTube video, I should get a raise. That being said, for those of you that don't know, the way the login chain works in modern technology, I claim who I am. This is usually my username, right, or my email address. This is who I purport to be. Then I give you my password or my PIN to prove that I am who I say I am. Multi-factor adds a second factor of proof, right? So the three categories that we recognize in the modern world are something you know, meaning like a password or a PIN, something you have, meaning like a credit card, an ATM card, or a phone, or something you are, like biometrics, your retina or your thumbprint. A true multi-factor contains one at least from two different categories. So if you are using your PIN and your password, those are two things you know. That does not count. Or if you have your phone and your ATM card, there's two things you have. That does not count. But if, like me, you've had an ATM card and a PIN for most of your life, the banks have been using multi-factor as long as I've been alive. ATM card I have, PIN I know. In 2026, or whenever you're watching this particular video, if you ever put a password in, it should just be intrinsic muscle memory for to grab your phone or to grab your YubiKey or to grab your token and add another thing. If it's not, you're missing something. And we talk about this when we do this live. While you're sitting here listening to this video, I don't always mean multi-factor is important at work. And it is. Don't get me wrong. It's the best thing we've got. We'll talk about how it's not perfect in a little bit. But I also mean at home personally. Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, they all have multi-factor and it's free. And it's the best thing we can think to protect an account. In fact, Microsoft believes multi-factor is 99.9% effective at blocking account attacks. In the cybersecurity world, that's as close to the guarantees we ever get. I can't think of anything else that's 99.9% effective at anything in my world. So while you're sitting here talking with us, or watching the video, please go to your Amazon, put in multi-factor on your phone, go to your email, go to your bank. It's all it can do is help you. And again, they're free.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Okay. Most of our clients live in the Microsoft world. So we thought it might be helpful just to show if you don't have this set up, this is how it works in our environments. For me, when I log in, I don't always have to log in every morning into Microsoft 365. We have a security policy that only requires this at certain intervals, and Stephen has set that, and I have to follow that. But when I do need to log in, I go to Microsoft 365 on the web, or I look it up and find it on Google and go there. When I click on the 365 login, it takes me to my tenant page. In my tenant page, it asks me for my email address. It asks me for my password. When I put my password in, it shows me a number, and I get a notification on my mobile device asking me to then place that number inside of the mobile device. And I also always check to make sure that the map looks about where I am, because there is such a thing as MFA bypass. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But
Now,
this, but
please note, one sec, everybody. Just the map has to be close. It doesn't have to be anywhere near exact, which is why Jason said that. Geolocation of IP addressing is always approximate. However, I'm currently in California, in Northern California. If I was to get this map and it was to say Louisiana, that's far enough away to be a concern. But if it was to
that's
say
really
San
good.
Francisco, which I'm not technically sitting in, not the biggest deal.
Yeah. So in this scenario, I am in Ohio. It's close to where I am. I drop the number in. I'm asked to do my biometrics on my phone, and boom, it drops me right into the tenant. Right. So it's not completely frictionless, but it's pretty lightweight and reasonably easy for me to use. Now, all of that said, Stephen, you kind of already hinted at this. There is such a thing as MFA bypass. You want to
Yeah,
expand on what that is at a high level for folks, and broadly
sure.
speaking, what we should do to head that off?
Everybody, this is why training matters. Multi-factor is fantastic. It's the best thing we have for account protection now. So please do not take this slide as don't use it. That's not the case. Multi-factor matters tremendously. But as everything else happens, it's not perfect, and the bad guys eventually find their way around it. Just like everything. That's why these trainings are ongoing. In this case, multi-factor bypass can work similarly to a phone forward. So most people should be familiar with calling one number and it forwarding automatically to another number invisibly. You could do that with a web page too. I can make a web page that just simply looks like Microsoft because it just pulls Microsoft pages and mirrors it. That's all it does. The address at the top would not be correct. And if you notice that, you'd see you were on the wrong web page, right? However, if, like 98% of people on the planet, it looks like Microsoft, you thought you were going to Microsoft, you just type your username and password in there, you're typing them into my theoretical hacker site at the moment. I will then steal them and send you to Microsoft, right? I am just mirroring Microsoft's pages. Effectively, the word is a proxy. I am proxying Microsoft's pages. You can get right in. That way, I've stolen your MFA token. I sent you to your email. You would never know. The reason we're telling you this and the reason this training matters so much is you have to make sure you're putting your password in and your multi-factor in the right place whenever you do it. In this case, here's an example of a legitimate Microsoft URL, microsoftonline.com, office.com they also own. They also own live.com and microsoft.com. But if it's not one of those and it just seems like something's not 100% correct or a random link, be careful. If you're putting your multi-factor in right now, it's pretty challenging to stop people from putting it into the wrong page. That's a technological challenge. There are some
And
solutions there are some solutions in the pipe right now. So if you're watching this later, as always, the good guys come up with good solutions for everything to plug the bad guys' holes. But it's always a game of catch up.
yeah. Okay. So that's multi-factor authentication. Now we're going to possibly confuse people here because there's also another thing called multi-channel verification. And I know that's a lot of multi-words and things to keep track of, but they're two very different things. Stephen, can you help folks understand what this is and why it's so important?
Sure. So multi-channel verification means simply to us using a different medium to verify a potentially sensitive request. In practice, this means pick up the phone and call somebody. And I'll give you a couple of examples, right? You get an email and someone says, hey, I work for you and I've changed my bank account. Please update my direct deposit to go here. Or you get an email or a text message or a Teams message from a vendor or a client, probably a vendor if you're paying them. The vendor says, hey, we've changed banks. send money elsewhere, or potentially a request from an executive to change their address. Please do not just simply trust an email, a text message, a Teams message for something that sensitive. In fact, if you are in some kind of financial role in your organization, you probably have two signers for large checks. It's a process portion. That's the second part of people, process, and technology to make sure money doesn't go to the wrong place. This is the literal exact same thing. We've had a couple of clients in the past who get an email from a vendor and they say, okay, vendor wants me to send money to a different place, so they just simply change the ACH payment. Vendor calls them a couple months and says, how come you're not paying me? Because no one picked up the phone to verify that vendor wasn't hacked. Turns out the vendor was compromised. Hackers have made off with millions of dollars because you just simply paid them because you didn't call and ask. So please, if anything else, if you get a request that is in any way sensitive, and I don't mean suspect, I mean change my address, change my social security number for some reason, change my bank account, pick up the phone and ask. It's the best way you can do to help.
The reason you know this is really good advice is because it's the one thing you don't want to do, probably.
100%. Listen,
So
again,
the
I'm a
short
millennial
version,
here. I hate the
pick
phone.
up the phone.
Yeah.
It will save you.
Absolutely.
That's one of the key takeaways there. Okay, let's start talking a little bit about cybersecurity hygiene, right? Again, so this is the section that should feel very much like review. Or at least we hope it does. If it doesn't, that's okay. But so to start with, let's start with networks, right? Most of us are working from home in some capacity. Less and less of us are working full time in the office. So for our home networks, let's make sure those home networks have a good password on them. More on that in just a moment. We should make sure we change that password with some regularity. We should not be giving that out to people that do not live in the house. And we should not forget that our smart devices are on this home network, and we should make sure that we're applying a level of scrutiny as to what devices we allow to connect to the network and which ones that we don't. Stephen, you want to expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, everybody. So there are some things in your house, and for the record, remember the Internet of Things, IoT stands for Internet of Things. The S in IoT stands for security. Let that one sink in for a minute. So listen, there are a few things in your house, smart devices.
People might be watching this early in the morning, so just
there's no S in IoT.
To be obvious, there is no S in IoT. Okay, thanks, Stephen.
So of course, so there are some
too cerebral on us there.
That's on me. It's my bad. It's my bad. So there's several things in your house that might actually benefit from Wi-Fi and probably do. Smart doorbell, right? You want to see your camera remotely? Of course. Or your thermostat. I want to heat my house before I get there. Or anything I use to stream, so your Roku device or your Chromecast, right? Of course. Those require internet to function. You got to connect into the internet. But there's a lot of things in our modern world that have Wi-Fi for some reason, and we're not quite sure why you would bother connecting them. Here's a great example. My fridge has Wi-Fi, my stove has Wi-Fi, my dishwasher has Wi-Fi, my washer and dryer have Wi-Fi, and I cannot for the life of me figure out what value I could possibly get out of connecting those things to Wi-Fi. Now, we do have a story about having to update a refrigerator, which is a little beyond the scope of this conversation, but the point is the Luxor in Las Vegas was compromised by a smart fish tank controller because somebody had joined it to their Wi-Fi, their internal corporate Wi-Fi, rather than their public Wi-Fi. But if something requests Wi-Fi, what benefit do you get out of it? Just make sure you actually get something that's tangible and real before you start randomly connecting devices to Wi-Fi, because everything you connect to Wi-Fi reports on the behavior of that device and your consumption habits to the manufacturer. You are giving them your data and your habits and a potential way for the bad guys in. So it doesn't need Wi-Fi. I know of a toothbrush that has Wi-Fi. I can't figure out Wi-Fi. It has it. Please don't connect your toothbrush to Wi-Fi unless this video goes extremely out of date and we get some benefit out of Wi-Fi enabled toothbrushes in the future that I cannot currently conceive.
And we will make
or
sure
anything
that
else.
it doesn't go out of date. If that changes, we will be back with a new update. All right. We promise that we give some guidance on passwords. Good passwords are long. Good passwords are random. We're pretty bad at random. That's why password generators and password software and password loggers like 1Password and BitLocker are important. Once upon a time, we used to advise people to come up with very complicated passwords because that at the time, that was what worked. That no longer works. Stephen, what does work?
Yes. So everybody, all credit to this comic to Randall Munroe of XKCD. XKCD is an internet comic. He's quite talented and very, very funny. We used to believe that passwords had to be like that first box there, Troubadour N3, with all the special characters and the capitals and the letters and the numbers. Turns out that that's not anymore. A lot harder for a computer to guess with the amount of computing power modern computers have, but it's really hard for a human to remember. Far better, take a bunch of words you know, cram them together. Please don't use like your anniversary, maiden name, child's date, dog's name. No, don't do that, right? A couple of words together that you know. We're going for 15 or longer characters in the modern world. There's a specific technical reason. For those of you that are watching and care, it's about NTLM, the password hashing algorithm. But beyond that, 15 characters. Cram a bunch of words together. You want to add a 1 or a 7 at the end, be my guest. It's easier to remember for you. Call it a passphrase in your head from now until basically forever, until we get rid of this technology. It's dramatically safer.
Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate that. Just to recap, 15 words or longer. Save you it can. All right. On workstations, when it comes to our machines, when you get up from your machine, you want to lock it up. Control-Alt-Delete on the Windows machine, Control-Command-Q on the Mac. And you might say to yourself, well, I work from home. Why does it matter? It is a good best practice, and this is about cybersecurity hygiene, right? Just the basic blocking and tackling. All right, you should never share your password with anyone. You should only use your work devices for work, and you should use home devices for personal use. And if you're working with your IT department or with another provider, you should leave your machine on so that those parties can run maintenance for you. All right, you should know your acceptable use policy. And an acceptable use policy is one of several policies that every organization should have relating to cybersecurity. Stephen, can you lay on us the core policies that every organization should have?
Yeah, everybody. So this information is gleaned almost exclusively from insurance company applications. So for cyber insurance, this is what most insurers look for. There's 4. A written information security policy is effectively an overarching policy of these are the policies we have. Here's where we control things. Here's our company's generalized stance on information security. We take this seriously. That's the first one. Acceptable use policy, which is right there on that slide, is the second one. And this is what you can and cannot do with the computer we are loaning you. This is a corporate piece of equipment. This is what we are looking at on the machine. Here's what you can do. Usually these have the you have no expectation of privacy on work equipment phrase. The third one is a disaster recovery policy. What happens if my office burns down? It's pretty simple. The last one is an incident response policy. What happens if the bad guys get in? And that's the difference between disaster recovery and incident response, is whether it's kind of an act of God or a malicious attack by humans. Those 4 not only are regularly asked for, they're really good cybersecurity hygiene to have, and having them and regularly testing them can have a positive impact on your insurance rates. We actually do this for quite a few of our clients, and it does have a pretty good impact on savings.
It's really good. Thank you, Stephen. For the purposes of this training, having yours, knowing yours, so that you can be a good corporate cyber citizen and apply the tenets outlined in your policy are what are important here. So, reach out to your team to get a hold of yours and make sure you read it. It's just a good best practice to follow. All right. When we're out surfing on the internet, you should only ever install software from safe sources. For the purposes of this training, what we're proposing here is that you use the stores, the Apple Store, the Windows Store, the Google Store. They're not perfect. Nothing in this training is. You probably are going to hear that over and over again. But there is a level of scrutiny there that gives a measure of protection. When you log into a website, you should also log out of it. You should only trust trustworthy sites with your passwords. And the way that you do that is by looking for the lock before entering your personal information. Okay, this is what that looks like. This technology is called SSL, or Secure Socket Layer. Stephen, this is not perfect, but can you please share a little bit about why this is important?
Sure. So everybody, especially my other technology brethren who are going to watch this video, we know this is a certificate, right? For those of you who are a little bit less technical, a certificate is effectively the website has said, I am who I claim to be to some certifying body that your computer trusts. And therefore, you can use my claim to encrypt the traffic between my computer and the website, right? It is absolutely table stakes for any website. If a website is lacking a certificate and it's not your own home firewall in your own house, it's out there on the public internet, that should be a problem immediately in your mind. All real websites, and I mean all of them, should have a certificate. It is just absolutely table stakes. That does not make it a good website. It just means it's past step one of the operator is trying to make it appear legitimate. So if you are missing the lock or it says not secure at the top of your browser, should be an immediate turnoff. If it has the lock, it's past one step. Not all of them. Doesn't mean it's good. It means it's currently not bad yet.
By extension, if it hasn't passed this, run for the hills, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is what happens if you're at a site and maybe you clicked on something you shouldn't have, but you're at the site and you're like, man, I don't know if I'm in the right place. How can you figure that out? So here's a way to diagnose. That's called the URL, the web address. That's what that's called. How can you diagnose that? So what we're looking at here is a fake page. Now it looks an awful lot like a page that we all probably go to, probably more than once a week. But here it's fake. And how can we diagnose that? Well, to look at that, let's look at how a domain is put together. First thing you want to do is find the .com or the .net or the .com, the .net, the .us. That's your top level domain. And then you want to start working your way left. As you start working your way left, you want to work your way left to the next dot. So in our example here, it's Tiny Dancing Horses is the domain. And then www is the subdomain. So taking that and pushing it up into the example, we find the .com and work our way left. And you can see the domain is actually tube-gif-converter. It's not Amazon. Amazon is in the subdomain. And so this is the way that you go about looking at and trying to diagnose whether you're in the right place or not. If you find yourself in the wrong place, then you should move off of that. And you might want to reach out to your team to make sure there hasn't been some kind of a compromise. All right, email. Okay, this one's really, really important because, Stephen, email is still the number one way that attackers get in, isn't it?
Not close. Absolutely.
Not even close. Okay.
Email is by far and away the most common vector for the bad guys. Everybody thinks that it's foreign government hacking teams breaking into your firewall like in the Matrix and hackers. Not even close. It's me sending you an email going, give me your password, and then you do.
Yep. People, process, and technology. The reason people's first is because people are the weakest link.
100%.
All right. First piece of advice here. Don't open attachments unless you're certain they're safe. What we mean by that these days is by certain they're safe, you probably should be expecting that attachment. And if you're not expecting it, you should use a second factor to try to verify that it is supposed to be coming to you. I have done that with Stephen before, and he has never yelled at me for doing it.
Never, and I wouldn't. For the record, if you are dealing with a client, calling them and saying, hey, did you mean to send me this email? Usually increases their trust, not inconveniences them. It's usually a decent client touch point.
Yeah. If you suspect email is malicious, don't open that email up. Just mark it as a malicious email, a phishing email, and move on. You should check the sender's email very closely. Now, this is a fairly rudimentary example, but you can see there's a difference between Bob Smith at Gurnail and Bob Smith at Gmail. Right. And you should not forward around emails, right? What you should do instead is take a screenshot if you have questions or concerns about it. That's what you could put forward. If you're forwarding the email, you're actually increasing the likelihood of someone else getting tripped up and clicking on it. So please don't do that. When you're looking at a note in your email inbox and you're concerned that maybe the link might not be the right link, the way to take a look at it would be just to hover over that link. When you hover over it, in the example here, it's showing you where the text, where the actual link is going. Sometimes that also shows up in the lower left-hand corner of your web browser or your email browser. Yeah, Stephen, jump on in, man.
Something else interesting on this email, everybody, that we will probably maybe get to in a little bit. If you look at Wes's signature, the director of valuable packages to be delivered, that strike you as kind
Yep.
of weird.
Yep. Very much so. Thank you, buddy. All
Mhm.
right. More on email. A lot of people don't know that email is actually not very safe after you hit send. Stephen, you want to talk a little bit about email encryption? I'm just going to populate everything for you there.
Absolutely. So again, for my very technical brethren watching this, we are aware that if it stays inside a provider, it is generally safer. However, for the broader audience here, email is sent through the internet unencrypted by default. Meaning, if I was to send an email from Microsoft 365, which tremendous amounts of people use, to Gmail, which tremendous amounts of people use, when it crosses the boundary between systems on the internet, it is not encrypted. So anybody who is just simply watching the internet for opportunity, and there are many entities that are doing that, can read that email completely plain text. There's no authentication involved. So if you are sending an email that contains something sensitive, it's not okay or safe to transmit it just with a straight email. One of the really big offenders we see of this are CPAs, personal CPAs, who are just sending your tax return via email, or like loan officers who send you all your loan documents. That's a problem, especially even if they sent them to you. Obviously, you didn't perpetrate that, but they're sending your information publicly. Conversely, if you've ever gotten an email from like your bank or a school or another financial institution that says, hey, click here to go to our portal on the web and view the email in that portal, that's an encrypted email. And that's awesome. You can do this with Microsoft 365 and Google as well. Here's a good example of how to do it in Outlook, right? You go to options, you set permissions on the side, and you hit encrypt. If you don't have this, I'd recommend reaching out to your IT team. Microsoft did implement this many years ago as a default for all Microsoft 365 tenants, but if if your tenant was created before that, you may have to make some small changes on it. But this is a very safe way to transmit. You can literally encrypt anything, and it's actually 1 to 2 additional clicks for the end recipient. It's, for example, goes from 365 to 365. Lots of businesses have Microsoft 365. It's completely seamless. It's really quite nice. So please use encryption for your email of anything sensitive, especially if you are a professional that is potentially sending sensitive information, an attorney or an accountant or something to that effect. This is the way to go.
Thanks. All right. Let's do some personal habits next, right? So you should always make sure that your smartphone has the locking enabled, right? Not everybody does this, but it's a good best practice. You should only give out personal or sensitive data on phone calls that you've initiated.
This is a bit important one, everybody. If somebody calls you and says, hey, I'm from your bank, cool, thank you. Hang up, flip over your ATM card and call the number on the back. Or do that same thing for anybody that calls you and says, please give me your password information.
Yeah, that's a very common social engineering attack to attempt that, and it's only increasing.
Mm.
Um, we're kind of in the world now where having an added layer of identity theft protection is really something that that folks should consider. Again, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this training to talk about what that is exactly, but that's something to explore. We've talked a little bit about password managers, Stephen. There's 2 that you really like. What are
Sure.
yeah, if you could please share that a little bit about that.
Sure. And hopefully this recommendation does not turn out to age poorly in the future. And if it does, we'll issue a retraction. Currently, the ones we like are 1Password and Bitwarden. That does not mean that others are bad. Although if you Google, there has been a specific one that has been mired in controversy for a while. I won't name it here. But we happen to like 1Password and Bitwarden. These are competitors for password management and storage. It's way better than that little black book you have on the top drawer of your desk or the sticky notes you have under your keyboard. It's a nice, safe place to store passwords. Listen, if a password manager gets hacked, and like I said, some have, sometimes things happen. That does not make this recommendation less good or less safe. It's the best option we have right now to store passwords and to generate random passwords in case of those sticking a bunch of words together is challenging for you.
It's really good. Okay, so now we're going to start working our way kind of over into a few examples. And Stephen, we're going to have you just kind of walk us through the examples that we've got.
Sure.
But one thing, just to start this off, we're all very familiar with these brands, and we have different opinions about them. They have one thing in common. They are the 3 most spoofed brands in phishing attack. Number 4 is DHL, which is one of the companies that delivers a lot of their stuff, right? And so we need to think about that when we're examining different different emails as they hit our inbox. And so, Stephen, we're just going to walk through an example or two and kind of throw it up there. And then maybe if you could walk through as we highlight the different elements, just to kind of reinforce some of the things we've been talking about. That sound good?
Absolutely.
All right. So here's our first example. And
of course. So what I want to point out of this one is the content of this email is strange. Now, Family Fraternal might very well be an organization that you know and use, or a client. But if you may notice that there's something about Zoom info onboarding in the forwarded message, and I don't know where Zoom info and Family Fraternal come in. Also, your account is in good standing, but the invoice needs attention is a very, very odd subject. And the third thing I would say is, if you've noticed, this forwarded message may or may not actually be forwarded. I can create an email that just simply says forwarded message below it and then type another email on top. Finally, can you imagine someone a vendor forwarding an email from someone in your organization telling you to pay something, which is what's going on here? That's very odd, right? In this case, this scenario was some high-level executive said, of course, bill my accounting department, and the vendor forwarded that message to the accounting department. This whole thing is odd, right? I'm not going to say there's massive typos in here, and I'm not going to say there's a bunch of issues with timing and dates, because AI is really good at not making those mistakes nowadays. But the context of this email is extremely strange, and it would be solved by picking up the phone and calling the person who the email claims to have been forwarded from.
Right. So a couple of things at play. Hopefully we've highlighted a few things that should have raised the suspicion flag. Always be cultivating a habit of suspicion, right? And then use a second channel to try to verify the information. All right. Here's our second example, Stephen.
So everybody, Mike Chapin is the major owner of our organization. He's a good guy. We like him a lot. I can tell you for 100% certainty, Mike Chapin has an Endsight.net email address. He is not at tagoresuites.com, 100%. But as my name is Stephen Hicks, and I know for sure there are other Stephen Hickses out there, you can put the name as anything you want, right? There might very well be another Mike Chapin out there. So the first thing that you should immediately look at this is info@tagoresuites.com is not Mike Chapin. That is why we have told you multiple times to look at the sender address, because they're trying to spoof our owner here. And you can see directly right there, it says this was sent from outside your company with someone who has the same name as inside your company. Be careful. This person is trying to do a little bit of funniness. And if you look at the context of the message, can you please update my direct deposit, in an email? No, absolutely not. And again, there's a FOMO issue here. We've had some executives who go, oh my gosh, I know this client, or some HR teams who go, oh my gosh, that's the owner. We got to get this request right now. We trust them. We know who this is. But this is not clearly from Mike. And as in the past, those emails were clearly not from the client or the vendor.
Yep. Okay. One last one. This one's a little bit different.
Yep. So everybody, this one it's LifeLock, just so you know. And the reason there's that massive URL there is that we moused over it so you could have a little picture here. We've pulled all of these messages from our spam filter, just so you know. These are, excuse me, these are real. So I got a Teams message from one of our employees. His name's Joseph, and he said, "Hey, Steve, I got this message from LifeLock," and he sent me a picture. He did not forward me the message. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate it. And he said, "Look at this URL. I can't tell if this is real." And so when we do this training live, I ask people. I say, "Hey, everybody, give me a 1 in chat if you think this is real. Give me a 2 in chat if you think this is fake, and give me a 3 in chat if you don't know." And I want to let that sink in for a second. Take a look at that URL, the address that we've moused over, and give yourself a second. What do you think? Do you think it's real? You think it's fake, or do you not know? Give you 5 seconds.
I know, because we've done this a dozen times or more, but I'm not telling.
Okay, well, anybody who's watching this video and is not a dirty cheater. So when Joseph sent this to me, the truth is, everybody, I didn't know. I cannot translate that encrypted URL off the top of my head. That would be neat, but I am not Data from Star Trek. So I said, "Joseph, here's what you do." And it was the same logic as, don't just answer the call. and give people your information from your bank. It's the same thing as if my bank calls me, I flip over my ATM card and call the number on the back of the bank to verify. I said, Joseph, do you have LifeLock? He goes, yes, it is a benefit our organization gives as employment. I said, fine. What I want you to do is go Google LifeLock. Do not use this email. Do not use the links in this email because the email could be false. Go Google LifeLock. Then log into LifeLock on their portal that you have found independently yourself and look to see if there are any alerts for dark web activity, which is the red part on the top there. And y'all, this was real. This is a good and legitimate email. And every time I say that, I get reactions from the crowd. They go, wow. And the truth is, I didn't know there actually was alert from on his account. And if I can't tell, how could anybody I mean, this is my job. Hopefully I'm not that bad at it. It's that hard. So we're trying to get people to use different methods and a lot of suspicion to verify these things because even when it's good, you're not sure that it isn't.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna move into our ethics and compliance section. As I mentioned at the outset of the video, we work with a lot of law firms, and if you are an attorney, this is information that hopefully you will find helpful as it relates to the California bar. Okay, so Stephen, the reason that we're including this is because attorneys and law firms are a prime target.
Absolutely. So everybody, we just want to be very, very clear on this. Attorneys are really, really talented, right? Especially if you're getting a degree from the bar and a degree and you're passing the bar, you're probably a legal expert. I would hope so. That's the point of it. But the bad guys know that attorneys also have access to very, very confidential information for their clients. And although attorney-client privilege is amazing when it comes to the U.S. justice system, doesn't exist in the bad guys world. If they have access to the data, they're going to extort you for it. That's just simply how it's going to work, right? And people say, hey, why are attorneys such a high value target, right? And if you look, attorneys, they have access to confidential client information. Jason, give me the next slide for that one, please. They have access to confidential information, so they are a gateway to valuable targets. You may be in a divorce, right? Imagine opposing counsel getting access to something they're not supposed to have that wasn't included in discovery. They have a wealth of litigation strategy, negotiation information, financial data. And it is true that smaller organizations, like, smaller law firms, don't necessarily have the budget for cybersecurity that, say, bigger law firms do. But reputation matters quite a bit to law, right? There are competitors, and I'm sure if you're a lawyer, you know who your competitors are, and they would be very happy to know that their competitors had a data breach, and that would make it a lot more challenging for someone who's Googling your law firm if the first thing they come up with is data breach rather than quality services in my area. It's going to be a significant impact to your business, so they know they can extort you for that. And finally, and this is really important, and we have an actual formal opinion from the California State Bar coming on this. Lawyers are legal experts. They're not technology experts, and frequently the things that matter most to attorneys, time, money, expertise, right? So attorneys are typically very highly educated and paid for their judgment and opinion, as you should be. So you trust your judgment and opinion. They have very, very little time. They're very time focused, of course, because they bill by the hour, right? And typically, attorneys are far more focused on getting their job done legally than the actual technology required to do the job. Now, there's a meaner way of saying that attorneys don't really care about technology, but that's not the point of this. What that means is that in 2023, 2024, and 2025, attorneys were the highest targets we saw in the small to medium business sector by a mile. Support staff, ironically, some of the lowest because they're worried about, not being able to support the 12 attorneys they're working on, so they're very, very careful. In fact, we usually see compromises in car washes where you're just on your phone, you have a second, you're blowing through emails, you're not really thinking because you just need some time. You got to fire off a couple quick responses, you click on something, you do something you weren't thinking of when you were watching like a cybersecurity presentation. The lawyers, please hear me. You are significant targets with access to lots of information. So,
and there's real opinions and real rules that you need to be paying attention to.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that are really, really important that I want to highlight on this slide. Lawyers must take reasonable measures to safeguard confidential client information when you're storing it or transmitting it. I don't know, I didn't know is not a valid legal defense. And that's literally the third bullet point. You have to secure client data. That is it. The bar is extremely clear. And if you do not understand, right on the third bullet point there, lawyers are not technologists. They do not understand. They are required to communicate with an expert. Doesn't mean you're required to follow what the expert says, but you at least must be advised of the risks to your organization, right? And there are some great solutions there: two-factor authentication, automatic log off, limiting household, limiting access, et cetera, et cetera. But the gist of the official California bar's opinions is you must figure out the risks to your organization and your clients. You must inform your clients of those risks, and you must do what you can to reasonably mitigate those risks. If you don't, you could be in violation of the bar opinions.
All right. As if that's not enough, there's formal
There,
opinion 477R.
right. So this provides
So much more that it has its own slides.
It does indeed. So there are some important opinions on what you can and cannot do when it comes to transmitting and using electronic data storage. So let's give you a couple of them here. So we'll go on to the next couple slides here. So you have a duty, a reasonable obligation to prevent unauthorized access. If you are randomly unencrypted emailing client data, that's not a reasonable step. It also emphasizes what reasonable efforts mean. Typically, that means anything that would cause you to go out of business due to expense is not reasonable. But for example, encrypting an email and having an acceptable use policy is a completely reasonable effort in the bar's mind. And you are advised, though not required, to conduct an annual risk assessment to the way you use technology. Your IT provider or Endsight or whomever can help you conduct these risk assessments. That goes a long way, and any attorney I've ever worked with has said, listen, I'm trying to argue for you here. That goes a long way if something happens to say, we are actually conducting risk assessments. If something went wrong, we're doing our best here. It's a pretty solid defense if you actually have documentation that you did a risk assessment and followed the recommendations. There's a few more things, however, because 477R is pretty significant. Lawyers do need to have enhanced security measures if you're dealing with something sensitive. We have a couple of clients that have very high net worth, very wealthy, very powerful, very famous clients, and they have to take additional precautions. You also need to talk to your clients. The confidentiality and consent portion is effectively saying, if you want me to use something else, you better sign a risk release. Right? If you want me to just email you your tax forms, or an attorney, you want me to email you the motion we're sending, okay, but we don't agree with it. And if you're going to use third-party providers like Microsoft 365, you at least need to make sure that they match with your security needs. That means you can't take some random fly-by-night startup in Slovenia, and that's real for the record, and just start using their AI to record your meetings, knowing it goes somewhere. You have to vet that. And more important than anything else, and hopefully we've gotten this across in this training, continuous monitoring is a really big deal. The bad guys change all the time because they have a ton of money. So the advice we're giving you now is not evergreen, and it's only going to get more intense. So keeping up to date with it is highly advised, and it goes back to a reasonable defense. If you're doing risk assessments commonly and you have a team that is regularly reviewing and advising you on things, it's a lot more defensible if something goes wrong.
Perfect. All right. We're at the end. Some things to remember. If you only remember a handful. 1, use multi-factor authentication everywhere. 2, cultivate a habit of suspicion every time your fingers touch a keyboard or a keypad. If you do those 2 things alone, they will keep you dramatically safer than folks that aren't doing that stuff. With that, we can say you have sat through end user cybersecurity training. If you've watched this all the way to the end, we're really appreciative that you did so. Have a great day. If you want additional great content from Endsight, we hope you'll subscribe to the channel and keep watching. Stephen posts security shorts with a high level of frequency, and we have regularly recurring webinars on security, on AI, on data and analysis, and it's all done for free because we believe a rising tide lifts all boats.
One of the few things a cybersecurity practitioner could never say. Please like and subscribe.